now for our international feature interview on stage. And it's my pleasure to welcome to moderate this discussion Mr. John Defterios, anchor at CNN. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Diala. Sean, again, thanks for the invitation. I don't think we need a preview from me because I thought the one that Chris gave, along with His Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Energy here in the UAE, was thorough. I checked my BlackBerry and my iPhone this morning before I came down, and we had a lot of alerts on my internal CNN email suggesting that the airstrikes have started. And I think for most of those who are in the room today, they'd have to go back a long, long time to see that sort of level of geopolitical uncertainty not impacting oil prices in the opposite direction or even energy prices to see them spiking up. I've been covering OPEC and the energy market since 1988, and I can't recall a time actually in the energy market where prices were edging lower with this much uncertainty on the table. Added to that, of course, we've seen a rising dollar, which hit prices in the last 10 days. Demand concerns coming out of China right now. I was in Munich over the weekend with a number of German industrialists at another event discussing the outlook for 2015, and none of them feel comfortable about where the European Central Bank, particularly the German Chancellor and others, are going with monetary policies. So if we could have a surprise in 2015, it certainly could be the strains on the European recovery for 2015. As Chris was suggesting, the recovery in China as well. Will President Xi and Premier Li be able to sustain growth of 7.5%? That is quite a question mark. And all the while, whether it's Fujairah, East Africa, and other countries around the world and regions around the world are coming on quite strong with their development. So incredibly good time to be here in Fujairah. As others were suggesting in their opening remarks, this is my first visit to Fujairah, although I've lived in Abu Dhabi now for 4 years. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And in fact, our program, CNN Marketplace Middle East, will be doing some interviews here on the ground today and actually going into the port of Fujairah and some of the terminals for gas and oil tomorrow. So it's a pleasure to be on the ground, and we do appreciate the invitation. As I suggested, I have covered OPEC for a number of years, but I've never had a chance to meet His Excellency, the Secretary General of the GECF. And in our brief conversation this morning in the Majlis, he was saying, you know, the GECF was founded back in 2001. That was a bit of a surprise to me. And the Secretariat finally formed in 2010. And I think it was kind of high time for the organization to have someone of his weight and knowledge to be the Secretary General. I will leave it there because that's a nice introduction for you, and it'll give us a chance to look at the role of the GECF today and where it's going in the next 10 years and how we can bring the 17 countries of this organization, which is based in Doha, together to advance policy at a very uncertain time, both in the oil and gas market. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Seyed Hossein Adeli to the stage for our one-on-one interview. Pleasure. Thanks. Do you want to take that for us?
Oh, there? Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, you can. I didn't know if you wanted to bring your bag up. You have your notes all ready to go.
Yes.
Okay, so our format is here, 20 minutes of question and answer, and then we open the floor for up to 10 to 15 minutes of questions from the floor. I think some of the surprises might come from the floor a little bit later. So you're ready. You bolt yourself in.
Yes, I'm very happy and pleased to be here in Fujairah. I thank Gulf Intelligence for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be here and to share our views in GECF, Gas Exporting Countries Forum, with the distinguished audience here and have interaction with them.
Let's start with how you see your mandate today. As we suggest, this is an organization that's been around since the turn of the century. You've had the mandate, Secretary General, since January, an incredibly challenging time because of the amount of investment going into LNG. What is the first priority? Is it to bring a very disparate group? Everybody thinks of the dozen within OPEC. You have 17 under your umbrella now. How do you find a common platform here to gauge the level of investment, the gas that's coming onto the market, and try to form a cohesive policy around that?
You know, the objective of gas exporting countries is just to exchange information, data, to be transparent to each other, and to have a platform for coordination of policies, and just to have exchanges of experience. It is not for putting some quota on production or doing some coordination for the prices. So this is why this is a platform where we monitor the market and developments of the market, which, as you rightly said, it's now a fast evolving market in gas. And actually, we say that gas is a rising star now. And there are lots of things that is happening on weekly basis, on daily basis, on gas developments in US, in Australia, in our region here, on the demand side, on the supply side. There are lots of geopolitical also developments which is taking place. And all of this is making gas market very interesting and, of course, very challenging, because there are lots of changes, and the countries which are our members are bound to adapt themselves to all of these changes. And we are a very small cosmopolitan organization. We have members from Latin American countries, Venezuela, Trinidad, Tobago, and we have Bolivia. Then we come to the Africa. We have Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea. We go to North Africa, Algeria, Libya, Egypt. And then in Europe, we have Netherlands and Norway and Russia. Then we have Kazakhstan as our observer member, Iraq. Then in our region, we have UAE, we have Qatar, and we have Oman. So it's, and Iran, of course, another one. So it's a vast area which we cover, and we are responsible for 67% of the gas reserves of the world, 65% of the LNG trade, and 40% of the pipeline trade of gas. So it's a fairly large organization with various kind of interests. Of course, they are partners with each other. At the same time, they have a special relationship with each other as well.
Good. Let's get into some of the key fundamentals that I'm sure this audience would like to hear about, because there's a number of different factors at play here. First and foremost, your view on the sustainability of the U.S. shale revolution. I've talked to a number of CEOs in the last 12 months who have decided to divest their holdings in their downstream shale production of gas, because they don't think it'll last more than 10 or 15 years, particularly at the rate that they're producing now, and with this goal to export some of that gas. From the GECF, how do you see the sustainability of the U.S. market?
You know, for the U.S. market, of course, we don't have any position, but the analysis that we have is that U.S. shale gas, of course, would continue to grow, and U.S. will start to be an exporter of gas since, from sometime around late 2015 or 2016. I mean, the Sabine project would be exporting. Of course, the amount of export would be very minimal. It's not going to be a large scale to have impact on in the market. But actually, we've seen that in the past year, the production of those wells which have dry gas is diminishing because of the price, and more production is focused on the rich gas, on the gas with liquids, because the price, the Henry Hub price, is not supporting the production there. So if the price remains at this level in US, of course, I'm not saying about the others, because you know, in gas we have regional prices. It doesn't have any relationship with each other. We have Asian region, in the Far East region, we have European region, we have the US. So the US Henry Hub, if it, last year, of course, the prices went up as far as it touched 7.4, but now it's 3.4. So if the prices remains at this level, it won't be sustainable, and it needs some raises in the prices.
So it's interesting because we saw the Moody's revised down its assumptions for Henry up to 3.75. So even you're suggesting that may be a difficult price.
Yes.
In what sort of time frame are you suggesting here? The next 9 to 12 months, it'll hover in that sort of level, which would curtail some of that production?
Well, I think that the prices, I'm not in sharing Moody's downsizing of the
You don't agree
figures.
with the downgrade?
No, I don't agree with that. And I think that in the next 12 months, we would witness some sort of hiking of the prices in order to sustain this production. And as we see that the U.S. would start exporting, then there would be more kind of encouragement and willingness on the part of the producers to produce more. And if they would like to produce more, then they have to have a good price.
Okay, to be clear though, this horizon that the majors are suggesting of 10 to 15 years of the sort of output levels that we're expecting to climb over the next 2 years is not sustainable in the United States? This is going to be a flash in the pan for America, a decade and a half, and it'll peter out?
You know, it's too soon to say that, actually, but it is, of course, conceivable that this would grow, and the U.S. would benefit from this cheap gas. Of course, the prices of gas in U.S. is dramatically down from something around $12 per million BTU. Now is something around 3 to 4. And so the economy would grow, would be more competitive. So there are lots of benefits for the U.S. to encourage the sustainability of this, even if it requires that the prices would go up. This is why, I mean, it has brought lots of benefits for the U.S. economy and the U.S. role in the energy market, in the global energy market, so that all political and economic factors would push to sustain this trend of production of shale gas.
Good. There's many in the market today that we see Argentina coming on stream. Last year at the Gulf Intelligence Conference that Sean convened in Abu Dhabi, there was a great deal of excitement and a number of members of the East African belt that we see coming on stream, Tanzania, Mozambique, and even others who want to create energy hubs. Argentina, East Africa, Australia, China is a little bit behind schedule. Are we going to have this conversation in 5 years and say, you know, as the GECF, we should have managed this a little bit and try to bring everybody to the table. We're now facing a glut of natural gas coming on stream in LNG.
You know, actually, we see it from the other angle because the demand for gas is rising, not just because of the economic growth, but also because of the shift in the energy mix to benefit gas as opposed to oil, and as opposed to coal to little extent. So the share of gas in the next 20 years would increase from something around 22, 23% to 25, 26%. And this is a huge amount of gas. So it's, the gas demand is going to be doubled. So actually, from the other side, we are very much concerned where this supply is coming from. And in all areas which you refer to, I mean, Australia, East Africa, it's true that we have new exporters, new producers. But, you know, the projects are not being completed on time. Australia have its own problems with the cost production. In East Africa, of course, they are coming up on the stream, but with lots of delay. Angola has some delay. Mozambique is on stream. Therefore, we need to have more gas, actually, because the demand is rising because of the economy as well as because of the shift in this energy mix.
Mr. Secretary General, is this a reason, the primary reason some of these players weren't in the market and they're kind of learning and having teething problems or well behind in terms of investment? Or is there a trepidation to invest more because of the price pressures we have seen? What's the balance here?
Well, I guess the balance is between, of course, the investment, as you said, and the prices which could really support these investments, because you have to have a prices which could support this. And of course, when we come to the prices in gas, we have long-term contracts. You know, I mean, what is different about gas is that there are a couple of differences. First is that you don't produce gas like oil and then you sell it. You sell it and then you produce it. So this is why you gear it with the long-term contract and with the prices which is already negotiated. So this is why, I mean, the long-term contract on the one hand and the pipeline trading and the the long-term contracts, all of these and the prices would give the balance between the investment and between the supply.
You raise an interesting point, because I hear some kind of privately balking about some of the levels that Qatar was able to secure, particularly in South Korea and in Japan on long-term pricing. And as the US comes on to fore, Australia comes into the market, China's slow to get to the market in terms of shale. There's maybe some reluctance by the major customers of Far East Asia to continue to pay the sort of level they're willing to pay for delivery from Qatar today. Is this going to put a lot of pressure on long-term contracts in Asia as East African shale hits the market and Australian shale hits the market in a greater way? Is this going to change the dynamics in Far East Asia?
Well, actually, we are not very much sure to have this much impact. But the impact is because of the policy change in Japan. You know, after Fukushima, Japan had to resort to gas for its power generation. And they decided to go back to nuclear fuel. But recently, it's been facing some difficulty, although it was an announced policy. But we've seen that their plan for having nuclear on board for 2014 and early 2015 has been postponed to later on. So this is why they would continue to need some more gas. But because of actually the demand in India, because we have to be careful about India also. India's demand for gas is rising. And so this is why this would be a kind of diversion from some other customers to the other customers.
So you think it's going to be a fairly balanced market
I
then?
think that, and also in some European countries. So some of our gas supply from this region would be diverted to both, some to the Asian market, India, and to some extent China, and then some to Europeans as well.
You remain pretty confident here.
Yes.
You do, honestly confident.
Of course.
Okay, let's say this is the drilling plot. This is ground zero, right?
Yes.
At sea level. The American shale is here.
Yes.
The way I understand it and read about it, the Chinese shale is way down deep.
Yes.
They had big targets by 2020 of 60 billion in terms of production, but it's about half that. China doesn't emerge as a major player in shale for another 20 years, or are they going to really accelerate their development in the next 10? What happens in China?
In our view, and according to our forecast, China would not be able to be a player in shale gas before 2030.
Oh.
Yes. Because of, first, they have access to Russia, and they would have access also to LNG. And then they have lots of problem in replicating American technology, and also the reservoirs of shale gas in China is located at the locations which is very difficult to extract it. I mean, they have some economic challenges, they have some political challenges, they lack enough water over there because fracking needs lots of water, lots of. So this is why I guess that with the limitations they have, they would need lots of time in order to reach to the point where they can economically start using and extracting shale gas to the amount. Of course, as you know, they have started already, but it's so minimal that it won't be meeting the internal demand.
It's interesting what you say about 2030 then, so it's going to stretch out a little bit. How much of a game changer was that deal between Russia and China. I was in St. Petersburg waiting to start the St. Petersburg Forum with Mr. Putin, and he wanted that deal before he came back to start that, as you know, that forum. He wanted that in his pocket. How much did he give up to get that deal with China, and how substantial is this $400 billion transaction over time? Did he have to give a lot up to get China on board?
You know, I don't call it a game changer because of the amount which is involved. But of course, it has some important impact. One is that, of course, this contract was being negotiated for some years.
10 years.
It was not, yes, yeah. It was not a new thing. It has lots of benefits for China. For Russia, also, it is a very good deal because this is the start of the Asian market.
And the tilt to the east, right?
Yes,
it is clearly the tilt to the east.
It is not just tilting to this because they had these Eastern Siberian reserves, and they wanted these reserves to be used for the East. So that was a plan. It was not just because of course, they used this juncture of the European challenges to make the deal, to strike the deal, because they were negotiating it. So one would say that this was an important contract, but not really a game changer, because China needed Russia, Russia needed China. They wanted to expand this market to the east. They had some reservoirs. This is why it's an important one, but the volume involved is, 38 BCM is not that much, which would affect the whole export of Russia or the Chinese demand.
Okay, let's get to a couple of more serious questions about the geopolitics, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. Is this going to be the winter that the lights go out in Ukraine? I understand there's a lot of negotiations here because Ukraine can't afford to pay for their gas, and that the European Union is going to be supporting them financially to make sure they get deliveries here. Are we going to see some pretty wild tricks from Moscow before it's all said and done on delivering gas to Ukraine and those extremely dependent in Eastern and Central Europe on Russian gas?
You know, I think that Russia is very cautious in keeping itself as a reliable supplier to Europe. So the game that Russia would play would be supporting this role, and they would do whatever they can to depict themselves and to act practically to seem as a reliable supplier, as they have been doing it. Russia's...
Even with the additional sanctions, I was a bit surprised that Mrs. Merkel decided to go for round three.
I think that Russia and Europe, in terms of gas, they are very much bound together. And Europe needs Russian gas, and Russia needs the European market. And they have been having this for the long period of time. Even they started it in the very worst times of the Cold War. So I guess that Russians would continue to play this positive game for becoming a very reliable supplier. So I'm optimistic that they negotiate, and if the financial problems would be addressed in one way or the other, then to some extent this would be coming to some kind of solution.
You don't see a shutdown of supplies to Ukraine this winter?
Well, I guess that there would be lots of attempts on Russian side and on other side to reach to some sort of solution.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't ask you to put your Iranian cap on as an Iranian, but your Secretary General's cap. There's a P5+1 negotiations taking place right now. A lot of fits and starts, a lot of confidence that this deal would be further along. Is it going to be the irony of all ironies that, a battle in ISIS in Syria and Iraq brings Iran and the P5+1 closer together, and investment can finally go into the gas and oil sector of Iran in a substantial way where the sanctions are lifted, the European and US producers are in? Well, can we have this conversation next year and that's happened? What do you think?
Well, I'm optimistic to some extent.
You're a very optimistic morning.
Yes, 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 of course. And I'm optimistic that at this juncture, the world needs Iranian gas. The world needs more gas and more energy. And Iran has been out of the international market, its energy, and the gas reserves of Iran is #1 in the world. And so I think that if the negotiations would be successful, then we would have more gas, which would serve the region, would serve the East, would serve the West. And it's a big market in energy, and it's a big reservoirs of the country. So I think I can say that it's going to be a game changer.
A game changer, but
Yes.
suggest we're sitting here in September 2014. By this time next fall, do we have a deal and the Western majors are in there doing development for Iran in the energy sector? What's your gut tell you?
Well, I think that, of course, depending, I don't want to just guess what will happen, but if the negotiations would go through, then I'm sure that as far as I know, there has been some contacts by some companies from different parts of the world, including the transatlantic companies, to see how they can play their role in the development of the Iranian fields.
Good. So there's a willingness to go in.
Yes.
The final question before I open it up to the floor quickly. It's unusual, as I said in my opening remarks, that you see a 15% correction in oil prices when there's so much uncertainty in the region right now. What does that tell us about the market? It's more mature, doesn't get too overly excited. They know that Iraqi crude was able to go to the export market, 2.5 million barrels a day, nearly still hitting to the market. Why don't we see the traditional knee-jerk reaction on gas and oil prices, Your Excellency?
You know, I guess that, of course, this question on oil should be answered by Mr. Al-Badri. But actually, I think that the world was not very much relying on Iraqi oil, because Iraq, although was getting to some sort of stability in terms of its production, but at the same time, it was on and off from time to time. Therefore, actually, Iraq was not that much on board psychologically. So this is why the psychological effect is not yet there. So Iraq was in a turmoil situation. It is in a worse situation, but it is not as stable as it used to be. So this is why nobody is counting on the Iraqi oil before, so that to get very much excited or concerned about these kind of things. At the same time, you have some LNG and you have some gas replacing, and you have storages. So I think in the short run, this is not going to affect the market very much. Okay. But if this continues, then the concern and spreads some other in some other areas, this is the most important concern, that if this turmoil would be spread over, spill over to other areas, then this would have a major impact if this sort of revolt or whatever we call terrorism would be spreading to other areas of oil-producing countries. It would be very alarming.
Okay, so you're watching Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE extremely carefully is what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But we hope that this would be contained.
Yeah, that seems to be the goal as
I'm
of this
also
morning.
optimistic on this.
Why don't we open the floor to questions? Sean, you'll give me the hook, or Diala. You have 5 minutes for questions. Is that okay? Yep, perfect. Any questions? Sean here.
I'd just like to ask Your Excellency, is there a consensus within the GECF to defend oil index pricing of gas? And you said at the beginning you exchange ideas, you share knowledge, but is there a consensus amongst all members on this point? And secondly, what is your thought on the emerging talks in Asia about creating a buyer's cartel to get better leverage on gas pricing? Because they are a little bit, I think, trying to get out of the sort of premium they have to pay. So just those two issues.
Well, on the oil indexed gas price, yes, all of our countries are more or less agree with this oil index and oil linked prices because there is, of course, a linkage between the different alternative source of energy. I mean, if you don't use oil, then, of course, gas is the cleanest fossil fuel. So there is also a need for a premium because of its clean nature. This is why all of the producers are in favor of that. But this does not mean that they are not following the market. Also, they are pragmatists, and they're following the market, and they see what is happening. And what is happening now is that, of course, the price is going up and down. And with the developments that is going to take place in the future, of course, there would be some impact, but not to the extent that would endanger the prices. And we think that still the gas prices would remain at the level which would sustain investment, enough investment and enough supply. And what was the second one?
The talk in Asia about a buyer's cartel
Yes.
to come together in order to try and reduce the premium that
Yes.
Asian buyers pay for LNG.
You know, it's too soon really to say that. I'm sure that all of you have heard about this OTC market in Japan, which started just a week ago. But in the first week, there was no single trade done in this market. So although Korea has started to do lots of reloading, Japan has made that. There is a willingness in Singapore to, with British Gas, to do some trading. Of course, all of them would have their own impact in the market. There is no doubt about it. But to what extent they have availability of the gas is a big question. Whether, because actually most of the producers would not be making spot gas available for this kind of trade. It is quite different from the oil, because whatever they develop it for the markets that they had already committed to. So this is why it won't have enough spot gas available for this much trading that could leave impact in the market. So it is too soon to say that they can play a major role like oil.
Following up on Sean's question here, this could radically impact Qatar. I mean, with the 50+ trains floating around the world. Do you think demand's going to hold up where Qatar and its very, very favorable pricing is going to be able to last if there's going to be initiatives like that to start bringing a cartel together on the pricing side, on the purchasing side?
You know, of course, there is no intention in GECF to talk about prices and setting prices. And as I said, that there are two things that makes us quite different from the oil. One is the nature of gas vis-a-vis oil, which is totally different energy source. And the second is that our statute is not calling for any kind of quota and production ceiling and all of these, or coordination on the prices. But Qatar is, and other producing countries, they are in a good position, actually, because they have demand in the east, and recently they have some demand in the west as well. So they are playing with both sides. And also, Qatar has the policy of moratorium. They have stopped increasing the production. And as far as I know, that this is going to be their policy up to 2018. And if they continue this policy of moratorium, that ceiling on the production, then with the increasing of the demand,
those prices will hold.
Yes, the prices would hold to some extent.
Good. I think we'll leave it there. But we have one more question. Oh, you have some more questions. You okay on time? Yeah, one more. Thank you. And just identify yourself, if you don't mind, to the Secretary General.
Alistair McBain, Arawak Energy. Your Excellency, a question about the long-term attractiveness of the Western European gas market. How do you feel in view of the continuing demand destruction in that region, and maybe further demand destruction in view of the perception as maybe Russia not being a terribly reliable long-term supplier?
If I get your question rightly, you're questioning the long-term demand of Europe and its relationship with Russia. Is that right?
Yes, basically in view of the reduction in demand which is taking place in Western Europe, through diversification, energy saving and so on, and whether that will, the momentum will now increase as a result of nervousness about long-term supplies from Russia.
You know, on Europe, there are a couple of things. First is that Europe's economy is not picking up and was hit by the financial crisis. So the demand for gas and energy was slowing down. This is on one hand. On the other hand, because of the cheap coal coming from the United States, the demand for gas also slowed down, and actually we see that the energy mix in Europe is having less gas and more coal.
It's a bit shocking, isn't it?
It is, of course, shocking from the
environmental standpoint.
From the environmental, because actually from the also Europeans have the highest commitment to environmental concerns.
Except when it comes for coal.
And yes, especially that there are lots of now negotiations on the environment and the Kyoto Protocol, the second phase. Next year in 2015, you are going to have a meeting to finalize all of these ceilings on the gas, on the greenhouse gas emission. So from that point of view is of course lots of problems. And I think that the Europeans have not yet come to their own decision what they want to do with the energy mix and with the packages that they have. Of course, they're working on the third energy package to integrate the infrastructure, all of these things. But actually, Europe is not in a clear situation itself what to do with the energy policy. This is one big question mark in front of Europe. On the other side, of course, there is this partnership with Russia. Of course, diversification of supply for Europe is not a new phenomenon. It has been going on for the past, I remember that when I was in charge of negotiation from Iranian side with the European market, they were discussing about diversification. So diversification is something that is going on in Europe for the past 30 years. It's not something new. But of course, it is important to see how the partnership with Russia would continue. And as I said, and I'm optimistic, because of the interdependence of these both sides and the huge infrastructure which is already in place. I mean,
pipelines and
pipelines, huge. And if you want to change it to other supplies, you need much more infrastructure. So this is why I guess that in the short run and medium term, this is going to continue. Okay. In the long run, it's too soon to say.
I see a number of hands are up. If you don't mind taking some questions during the coffee break, because I think we've exhausted our allotment. It was always a pleasure. Nice round of applause for the Secretary General of the GECF.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.